There is a legend among military historians, a piece of battlefield folklore from the Second World War. It's a grim joke that the American Sherman tank was nicknamed the Ronson, after a popular brand of cigarette lighter. Why? Because it lit up on the first strike. To the German tankers of 1944, this wasn't a joke, it was a fact. They saw the Sherman as a death trap, a tall, thinly armored coffin on tracks. They would watch from the safety of their thick-skinned, low-profile Panthers and Tigers with their high-velocity 88mm cannons, and they would laugh. They would laugh at the sheer arrogance of an army that would send its sons to fight in these mass-produced metal boxes. The German Panzer crews were the elite, the knights of the modern age, clad in superior steel. The Americans were just factory boys in cheap tin cans. And for the most part, they were right. The Sherman was dangerously outmatched. But what the German tactical manuals and the arrogant veterans of the Eastern Front failed to account for was the one variable that can turn a tin can into a terrifying weapon: the crew inside it. This is the story of one such crew, one Sherman tank, and one man, a quiet, dirt-poor farm boy from Texas who would take their Ronson and use it to burn a path of destruction through the heart of the German war machine, a path so bloody and so relentless that German intelligence began to issue specific warnings about a single, ghost-like American tank that seemed to be everywhere at once, a tank that didn't run, that didn't hide, but that attacked with a ferocity they simply could not comprehend. This is not the story of a tank. This is the story of the man inside it. A man who in just 81 days would achieve a combat record so staggering it remains almost unbelievable to this day. A man who became the one American tanker the German Panzer divisions truly learned to fear. This is the story of Staff Sergeant Lafayette Wardaddy Poole. To understand the man who would become the bane of the Panzerwaffe, you must travel to the dusty, desolate cotton fields of East Texas during the Great Depression. Lafayette Poole was born in 1919 into a world of hard labor and quiet poverty. He was not a natural-born warrior. He was a quiet, unassuming boy who dropped out of school to help his family, another faceless child of the Depression. But he had two skills that would later define his life: an almost supernatural talent for mechanics and an unshakable, ice-cold calm under pressure. He tried to join the Navy, but was rejected for a slight eye impairment. So in 1941, as the world was catching fire, he joined the Army. They saw his mechanical aptitude and assigned him to the newly formed 3rd Armored Division, nicknamed the Spearhead Division. He was a natural. He could feel the rhythm of an engine, the language of a transmission. He knew a tank not as a machine, but as a living, breathing creature. But it was his skill as a commander that set him apart. He was a quiet leader. He didn't scream or shout. He spoke in a low, calm Texas drawl, even in the heat of battle. And he possessed an innate, almost predatory understanding of tank warfare. He was a hunter. He knew how to use the terrain, how to use speed and maneuver to overcome the Sherman's technical inferiority. He understood the fundamental truth that the German tankers in their arrogance had forgotten. A tank is only as good as the men who crew it. He handpicked his own crew, a band of brothers who would become a seamless, brutally efficient killing machine. There was Corporal Wilbert "Red" Richards, the driver, a man who could make the 30-ton Sherman dance like a ballerina. There was Private Bert "Schoolboy" Close, the co-driver and bow gunner, the youngest of the group. There was Corporal Willis "Groundhog" Oler, the gunner, a man with a preternatural ability to put a 75mm shell on target while moving at full speed. And finally, there was Technician 5th grade Delbert "Jailbird" Boggs, the loader, whose speed and efficiency meant their cannon was always ready to fire. Together, they were more than a crew. They were a single organism. They called their tank "In the Mood," and as they landed on the shores of Normandy in late June of 1944, just a few weeks after D-Day, they were about to introduce their own unique brand of aggressive, relentless warfare to the veteran Panzer divisions waiting for them in the dense, deadly hedgerows of France. The German tankers were about to learn a lesson they had not been taught in their training manuals. Never, ever underestimate a quiet man from Texas.
The hedgerow country of Normandy was a tanker's worst nightmare. A maze of small fields, separated by ancient earthen walls and thick, impenetrable bushes. It was a landscape designed for ambushes. German anti-tank guns, the dreaded Pak-40s, and veteran Panzer crews were hidden around every corner. For the advancing American armored columns, it was a meat grinder. Shermans were being brewed up left and right, their crews incinerated inside their Ronsons. But from the very first day of combat, the crew of In the Mood was different. Lafayette Poole fought with a philosophy that was alien to most American tankers. He believed that the Sherman's only real advantage were its speed, its reliability, and its fast turret traverse, and he used them with a ruthless efficiency. He never stopped moving. His driver, Red, would keep the tank in constant motion, making them an incredibly difficult target to hit. While other Shermans would cautiously advance, stop, fire, and become a static target, In the Mood was a blur of motion. Their tactic was simple and terrifyingly effective. Attack. Always attack. Poole would use his tank not as a piece of mobile artillery, but as a cavalry charger. He would identify an enemy position, and instead of engaging from a distance, he would order Red to charge directly at it, Oler firing the main gun on the move, Boggs loading with lightning speed, and Schoolboy blazing away with the bow machine gun. The German anti-tank gun crews, accustomed to American tanks behaving cautiously, were completely unnerved by this tactic. A Sherman tank, a Ronson, was not supposed to charge them like a raging bull. The sheer audacity of it, the raw, focused aggression, would cause them to panic, to fire hastily and miss. And by the time they had reloaded, In the Mood would be on top of them, its cannon firing, its machine guns chattering. In their very first engagement, they destroyed a German armored car. A few days later, they were credited with their first Panzer kill, then another, and another. The numbers began to pile up at a rate that seemed impossible. While other crews were lucky to survive a few weeks, Poole and his men were on a rampage. They became the lead tank in almost every major assault their combat command undertook. They were the tip of the spear. The German soldiers in their sector began to talk. They spoke of a single, seemingly invincible tank that fought with a suicidal bravery they had never witnessed before. It was a ghost, a phantom that would appear out of nowhere, destroy their guns and tanks, and vanish before they could mount an effective defense. They didn't know the commander's name. They only knew the name painted on the side of the tank that had become their personal devil. In the Mood.
As the American army broke out of the Normandy hedgerows and began its thunderous race across France, the legend of Lafayette Poole and his crew grew with every passing mile. Their tank, In the Mood, was a rolling tally sheet of destruction. The kill markings painted on its barrel began to look like a laundry list. At the town of Orleans, they destroyed a German Panther tank, a beast that was supposed to be immune to their 75mm gun, by outmaneuvering it and hitting it in its weaker side armor. At the Battle of the Falaise Pocket, where the German 7th Army was being annihilated, In the Mood was in the thick of the fighting, a steel wolf among the scattered flock. They were a self-contained storm of destruction. Their combat record became so extraordinary that it began to attract attention all the way up the chain of command. Generals wanted to meet this quiet sergeant who was achieving results that were, frankly, unbelievable. A war correspondent was assigned to follow them, to document the exploits of this wonder crew. What he saw was a level of teamwork and efficiency that was almost telepathic. Poole, the commander, would stand tall in his open hatch, even under fire, scanning the battlefield with his binoculars. He would spot a target, a flicker of movement, a glint of steel. He wouldn't shout. He would speak in his calm Texas drawl. "Aller, traverse left, target enemy tank, 2 o'clock. Aller would already be moving the turret, his eye pressed to the sight. "I'm on him, skipper." "Fire," Poole would say, and before the word had even finished leaving his mouth, the cannon would roar. As the tank recoiled from the blast, Boggs, the loader, would already be ramming another shell into the breach, the clang of the metal, a constant rhythmic beat of their deadly work. All the while, Red would be driving, juking, and weaving, never presenting a static target. They fought through the massive tank battle at Aricourt. They crossed the Moselle River. They breached the formidable Siegfried Line, the dragon's teeth of Germany's western border. Their original tank, In the Mood, was eventually knocked out of action, but the crew survived. They were given a new tank. They were knocked out again. They were given a third. The crew seemed to be charmed, protected by a divine providence. But their luck, stretched thin over months of relentless combat, was about to run out. By mid-September, their official tally was staggering. They were credited with destroying 258 German vehicles, including dozens of tanks and self-propelled guns, killing over 1,000 German soldiers and capturing hundreds more. This from a single tank crew in just 81 days of combat. It is a record that has never been equaled. The German High Command in their sector was now fully aware of them. Intelligence reports spoke of a single American tank crew that was acting as the unstoppable spearhead of the 3rd Armored Division. Orders were issued. This tank had to be stopped. The night of September 19th, 1944, near the small German town of Stolberg. The crew of In the Mood, now on their 3rd Sherman tank, was leading the advance. It was a dark, moonless night, and a thick fog clung to the ground. It was perfect weather for an ambush. They were part of a column of tanks and infantry moving cautiously through a narrow valley. Suddenly, the world erupted. A German Panther tank, hidden perfectly in a hull-down position, opened fire. The first high-velocity shell tore through the night and slammed into the lead American tank, instantly turning it into a raging inferno. The column was trapped.
Poole, as always, reacted instantly. He ordered Red to pull out of the column and flank the enemy position. But as they moved, a second German Panther, hidden on the opposite side of the valley, opened fire. Its shell hit in the mood with the force of a thunderclap. The tank was thrown sideways. The hit was catastrophic. The shell didn't penetrate, but it cracked the armor and sent a shower of red-hot metal spall ricocheting around the inside of the turret. Poole was thrown from his commander's hatch, his body ripped open by a massive piece of shrapnel that nearly severed his leg. He landed in a ditch, bleeding profusely, trying desperately to apply a tourniquet to his own mangled limb. Inside the tank, it was a scene of chaos and horror. Uller, the gunner, was wounded. The rest of the crew, though dazed, was still alive. They knew they had to get out. The tank had been hit, and the next shell would be the one that turned it into a Ronson. They scrambled out of the hatches and dove for cover. But Lafayette Poole refused to leave the fight. Lying in the ditch, his leg a bloody ruin, he saw that the crew of his wingman's tank was still trapped inside their burning vehicle. He began to crawl back towards the firefight, dragging his shattered leg behind him, trying to get to a position where he could direct the other tank's fire. He was a commander to the very last. He was eventually evacuated, his body broken, but his spirit still burning. His war was over. For 81 days, he and his crew had been the most lethal tank team on the Western Front. They had taken on the best the German army had to offer and had emerged victorious, time and time again. They had proven that the myth of the Ronson was just that, a myth. In the hands of a hunter, even a tin can could become a tiger. Lafayette Poole spent the next 2 years in and out of army hospitals. The doctors wanted to amputate his leg. He refused. In an echo of the same stubborn will that had made him so deadly on the battlefield, he endured dozens of painful surgeries and taught himself to walk again. He was eventually fitted with a prosthetic, but he had saved his leg. He returned home, not to a hero's parade, but to a quiet life. He never sought fame or recognition. He worked as a businessman, and later as a preacher. He rarely spoke of the war, except with his old crew members, the brothers who had shared that whirlwind of fire and steel with him. The medals he received, including the Distinguished Service Cross, the Legion of Merit, and the Silver Star, were kept in a shoebox. But his legacy was not forgotten. Within the armored community of the U.S. Army, the name Wardaddy Poole is legend. He is the benchmark, the unofficial patron saint of the American tanker. He is the ultimate example of how superior training, aggressive tactics, and an unbreakable bond between a crew can overcome any technical disadvantage. The German tankers of World War II were right to be confident in their superior machines. Their Panthers and their Tigers were marvels of engineering, deadly predators on the battlefield. But what they learned in the fields of France and the valleys of Germany was that there is something more dangerous than a heavy tank with a powerful gun. It is a quiet, determined man from Texas inside a Sherman called In the Mood, with a crew that would follow him to the gates of hell and back. Lafayette Poole and his men were the proof. They were the ghost in the machine, the human element that turned the tide, one exploding German tank at a time. They were the men who made the German generals fear the Sherman.